What is up, guys? In today's video, I'm going to be going over some tips to hopefully help you lose less to the new Star Wars mythics that were added in this week's update. As always, if you guys do enjoy this video, remember to give it a like, subscribe if you'd like to see more, and comment down below if you've been struggling to play against these Star Wars mythics in zero build. So, for starters, before we talk about anything, this item should only be in the game until the next major update, which will likely be the week after next, or maybe even the week after that for Fortnite. It was in the patch notes when this item was added that it'll only be here until 26.30, which is the next major update. Not really sure how they're going to do the challenges when it comes to that sort of thing, since the skin should be unlockable for the remainder of the season, but just know that this item should be relatively temporary and it shouldn't remain in the game until the entirety of the season, So when it comes to the melee attack, this is going to be when you're close to the person and they're just spamming you with melee. I think one of the biggest things is just going to be to back up when shooting at them, but just being weird with your movement in general. If you just stand there and let them attack you, that's not great. But if you're backing up while shooting, if you're jumping around while shooting, maybe if you're trying to slide behind them while shooting or sliding away, do things to make it harder for you to hit, because they are using a melee weapon at the end of the day, and the attack rate isn't that ridiculous. Every attack you dodge, they have to there's a time between them being able to attack again because of the animation, they swing it around. And so each time you dodge one or make them miss one, you're buying time for yourself, and hopefully you're able to out damage them before they eliminate you. Soaring sprints also works really well with this, because you can just kind of sprint jump, and then now you're in the air shooting down on them. And a lot of players aren't just going to look up when they're trying to melee people with the lightsaber. And again, if they're swinging at you and then you just kind of soaring sprints jump, and then now you're above them or behind them, it makes it much harder for them to kind of stop their swinging, turn around and readjust, and then catch you again. A lot of people, when they're attacking you with this, they just spam the attack button. So once you're able to dodge any of their attacks, it'll really throw them off. The ice wall can also work pretty well against this, because if you put the ice wall down, it causes not like a shockwave effect, but it forces the person away from you a little bit. And that can, somewhat invalidate the lightsaber, since it is a melee weapon. So if you're going to push somebody that's using the lightsaber, just shockwave, place the ice wall. Now they're going to be forced back a little bit, and you also have a barrier or a piece of cover to play off as you start, damaging them. And just in general, you don't want to get close to these players unless you have them weak. I think the reason why a lot of people struggle against the lightsabers is they see somebody and then they push them without getting any opening tags or damage at all. And that just makes your life much harder. And that's usually going to not be the play all the time. You don't want to just be getting on people without any early tags. So, opening a fight with those mid-range tags and getting that early damage makes it much more likely that you actually win the damage race if you do end up having to fight a lightsaber in close range. Another thing the lightsaber can do is that it can block bullets. This is just going to be if they hit their aim down sights button or whatever when they have the lightsaber out, and this blocks a set amount of damage. And then once their block is broken, once the amount of damage it can block is exceeded, they kind of get stunned to an extent, and then you can do a lot of damage to them. So if you encounter somebody that's using this, for one, you might not want to just tunnel vision on them, especially if it's team game modes and you have, if you're playing squads and two people are blocking with lightsabers, maybe focus the other people and not just spam the lightsaber user and then get beamed by their teammates, So just keep that in mind. You might not always want to just spray out their block, but let's say you are in a situation where you think it's worth spraying out their block. You don't think you're going to get third-partied, because you do leave yourself very vulnerable when doing this. I would just want to spray it with any sort of decent fire rate weapon. The shotguns are not great for this unless you have something like the exotic Maven and it's already going with its insane fire rate. But something like the combat SMG, the twin mag AR, can break the block of the lightsaber relatively quickly. And then you just want to make sure you're looking at their head so that you start getting damage in the moment that their block breaks. So I usually just ADS their head, spam fire, and then the moment their block breaks, you get a few headshots in. They are going to be able to block again, but you'll probably get the kill off those initial shots if you already had them weak, or you're just going to make it easier for you to transition that fight into a close range fight. But again, I think the biggest thing a lot of people struggle with when it comes to like dealing with the person blocking bullets is that they tunnel vision in on it too much, and then you leave yourself as an easy target for potential third parties or the lightsaber users' teammates. And then the final thing we're going to talk about is going to be the thing that I think most people are struggling with most, or what is the most annoying thing to deal with this lightsaber, and that is going to be the force push ability. This will allow the person to push you away from them, and this really stinks when it comes to endgame because it'll force you into zone a lot of times, and then you just start taking a lot of storm damage. And just the nature of the game, once you make it endgame, the storm is already so small that like you're always going to get forced into zone pretty much. So the biggest piece of advice, again, would just be to try not to get too close to them unless you already have them super weak. If you think you're going to be able to close that kill, then sure, maybe get on them. But the force push range seems to actually be pretty decent. I was testing it, and it seems to be about 30 meters or so, which is much longer than what I expected. I think if you're on like the edge of its range, you get affected less than if you're super close to the person. But again, you can ping the ground or mark the ground and then kind of back up away from it, and then you can kind of see what 30 meters looks like in game, and it's much larger than what I thought the range on this was going to be. So that's kind of the distance you want in between you and the lightsaber user. The ice wall can kind of block the force push ability, but it's weird about when it blocks it and when it doesn't. It seems like the person using the push needs to have no line of sight on you at all. So if you put your ice wall down and then they use it and you're kind of like all the way protected by your ice wall, you might be good. But if you're like towards the top of your ice wall, like peeking to beam them, then you still might get affected. It's been really weird. When I've used the ice wall, I've had times where it blocks and I've had times where it doesn't. So I think it's just like if any of your character is showing in the wind at all, then you'll get affected. Another thing that can make playing against this a lot better is going to be mobility items. So shockwaves are great for this. One, you could just potentially shockwave the person themselves. Like if you're, let's say you get decent tags on them and then you're pushing them, you could just shockwave the lightsaber user out of zone, and that'll catch a lot of people off guard. But even if you do get pushed into zone, that's going to be most problematic for when you don't have mobility yourself. But if you have shockwaves yourself, you can get back in zone. It's still not an ideal situation. You know, they can fry you. You're going to be taking a lot of storm damage, but just having some mobility to get back into zone relatively quickly is nice. And I think the shockwaves work best for this. As well as just getting kills throughout the course of the game. And this kind of happened when the shockwave hammer was in the game as well. People complained about the shockwave hammer just knocking them into zone. The range on the shockwave hammer's push was not nearly as good as the lightsabers is, but it kind of boils back to the same thing, that like the earlier you can end the game, the better in some ways. Like it isn't good to have that mindset all the time, but if you're letting the game go into like the 4th or 5th moving zone where it's like super tiny, then that's when this lightsaber push thing is going to be most problematic against you. But if you're able to end the game while the zone is still, you know, somewhat large, not like ridiculous, but there's enough room for you to play the game and not just get force pushed into zone because there's nothing else that can really happen, I think that's ideal. So if you have been getting into those like super late zones and there's just like not much cover for you, and like there's nothing, like you can't even escape the range of this and still be in zone, I would say maybe try to play a little bit more aggro. You know, there's a balancing there. You don't want to play just dumb aggro to the point where you die, but ending the game a little bit before it, or not letting the game get to that point, might be ideal. And that just comes down to being a bit more proactive in the end game, picking up kills over the course of like during like the early and mid game. That way the lobby is more dead. I feel like makes it much easier to play end game. And then even once you get into end game, like 5th or 6th zone, you know, 7th zone onward, like still play to get kills. I feel like a lot of people just kind of play to do nothing end game, and then they hope the win will kind of fall into their lap, and then like the zone gets super small and they get force pushed into zone. But if you're a little bit more proactive in the mid to late game, I think the ice wall works great for this, because a lot of what makes people not play, be proactive in the end game, I feel like, is just that the cover is limited. But if you're able to like consistently rotate into zone, put an ice wall, and then hold the rest of the lobby, you're going to pick up kills. The lobby is going to be less alive, and hopefully you're able to pick off these lightsaber users with AR damage, or at least like, you know, get them super weak, and then you can force the kill when the zone is still large enough that it's not just like an automatic you're into zone by the time they force push you. But this playstyle is definitely annoying, especially the more people you have doing it, because from my experience, when you have people playing off the lightsaber, they seem to just all ignore each other and then focus on the one person actually like shooting and doing things. And so you get into like weird experiences where like they're all just running around pushing you and not like fighting each other. But that kind of comes back to what I was talking about before about getting more kills like 6 zone onward than like you typically might, and then hopefully the lobby is less populated and you don't get into those super small zones. That's basically how I would play it. I just try not to let the game get to like super late in the game, and if at any point I see someone like, you know, let's say we're decently late into the game, if I see anyone using a lightsaber, I am targeting them. Not necessarily that I'm going to throw my game trying to eliminate them, but if I have an option to like third party a fight and kill them, that's the person I'm going to eliminate. But that is going to be it for this video. I hope you guys found this helpful, informative, interesting. The twin mag AR is very powerful, and just like a few shots you can get off with that weapon when the opponent is caught off guard make it very easy for you to eliminate them and not have to deal with this ice wall as much. But if you guys found this helpful, informative, interesting, remember to give it a like, subscribe if you like to see more, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.